Okay, I just want to welcome everybody. I think I'm recording. I'm not really sure, but anyway, this is episode 2 of the spiritual moment on the Precious Blood Youth Group Catholic channel. And so, anyway, I'm just going to be talking, as I did in the other episode, about the spiritual life and about the life of prayer, and hopefully giving some practical help and examples from lives of the saints to help us to pray. This is specifically oriented to prayer and what is prayer and how can I pray and what is the meaning of it and etc. So you'll have to excuse me, I have a little bit of a cold here. I'm going to be sniffing a lot. But anyway, to start out, I have this crucifix here. I think you can see it. It's pretty cool, and right here below is a relic of Blessed Francis Xavier's Selos. So I wanted to set this somewhere, but I don't have a shelf for it. So anyway, it's kind of going to be right here with us somewhere. What we're talking about on the spiritual minute today is the spiritual life, and what I want to tell you about that is first I want to start with an analogy and then talk about some of the lives of the saints. And so here's what I want to say. Prayer is a battle, and it kind of is that way because of original sin and sin's effects in our lives. There's kind of like it's hard to pray. It's hard to pray, and you probably have noticed that in your own life. There's all these things to do. Some people don't know how to pray. Well, how do I talk to God? And a lot of people, I think, suffer from not having an attraction or a desire to pray. I kind of don't want to pray. Especially young people tell me prayer is boring. What do I do? So I just want to outline a couple of things and talk about an analogy. And here it is. I used to be a runner, kind of like a long distance runner. And ever since the birth of my son Isaac, running has kind of gone out the door. But what I remember about running is that at the beginning of the spring, when I would go outside to attempt to run again, I would start on the very first day, having not ran in 3 months or 4 months, and it would be very difficult. And I would go for 5 minutes or maybe 10 at the most, and then I would be completely tired. The next day I would go out, I'd be able to run for 11 or 12 minutes. The following day, 13 or 14 minutes, maybe 15, and then I would work up and up and up. And what I noticed about my running is that when I worked up to about 30 minutes, after 3 weeks or 4 weeks or maybe a couple of months, you come to your second wind, okay? And runners have the second wind, and you can run in such a way that you're kind of like not tired anymore, but you're running and your breathing is fine and you're running fast and you're really, really enjoying it. But it takes a long time to work up to that. And this is a good and helpful analogy for me because that's kind of like the life of prayer. And when you're talking about prayer, the Catholic Church kind of like outlines prayer for us in many ways. If you get the chance to go to the Catechism of the Catholic Church, the 4th section really talks all about prayer and the beauty of prayer and the challenges. But what I want to share with you is that the tradition of the Church and the great saints always talk about 3 particular stages of prayer. The first stage is called the illuminative stage. The second is called the purgative stage. And the third is called the unitive stage of the life of prayer. So these stages are very similar to the analogy of running. And that's what I wanted to share with you. The saints, they say, when you start to pray, the first stage of prayer really comes in the illuminative stage. And at first, it's really, really difficult, and you have to stay with it and stay with it and go again and go again. And eventually you work up to the very first stage of prayer, which is the illuminative stage, and that is kind of like the second wind of running. Okay, I just got to cancel this right here. The second wind of running. It's a joy. It becomes a joy to pray, and you're in this stage called illuminative stage. And I remember when I first started praying, that was a beautiful stage, and I tried and I tried and I kept going and I kept going. And then I finally went off to the seminary, and I was like, well, I'm getting ready to go to the seminary, so I need to pray better. I started to pray, and I was giving my life and my whole heart to God, and He was really blessing me, and everything in prayer was a joy. And it was very easy for me to pray, and I wanted to pray all the time, all the time. I would go to Mass frequently, pray all kinds of prayers, be in prayer for a long, long time, day to day. And this is called the illuminative stage. Now here's an example from a quote from Saint Teresa, the Little Flower, a very famous saint, and she died when she was 24 years old, and somebody who I really appealed to a lot. She says, "God stoops down to our nothingness and transforms that nothingness into fire." She also says, "Jesus, He will come for us, however far away we may be from Him, and He will set us afire with His love." And these are just simple quotes that really explain many things, but they really kind of like explain the first illuminative stage of prayer. Now the second stage of prayer is kind of harder to explain. It's called the purgative stage. And because of our nature, and also because of God's nature, we have a great struggle in the very beginning of prayer, and then a great joy. This is called the illuminative stage. And then you have another struggle, but it's more intense than the first struggle. In fact, it is incredibly intense. John of the Cross, who was a great mystical saint from Spain, calls this stage the dark night of the soul, and that's really common. You probably have heard that before, maybe or maybe not. And the purgative stage really is a moment where God, who loves us very much and is constantly seeking after us and hoping that we come to Him in everything, He really pulls away from us intentionally, testing whether or not we will pursue Him in love. And so it's kind of like the beloved God pulls away slightly from us, the beloved, in our prayer, to see whether or not we will continue to pursue Him. And this stage becomes very difficult. It can last, in fact, an entire lifetime in the purgative stage. Many of the saints talk about that. And it's good for us. It's good for us because what's happening is we are letting go of kind of like all these things that we're kind of attached to that take the priority of place where God should always have in our life. So God is saying to us essentially, well, if you love, like your job more than me, or if you love your hobbies more than me, or if you love and are devoted in your time to some area more than me, then I want you to become devoted to me above everything. And it's really, really good for us. Now, this is a hard stage to explain. I'm not even sure that I can do a good job explaining it. If you want the fullness of the explanation, you can go and read about St. John of the Cross and Teresa the Little Flower. But the second stage is called the purgative stage. If you're in that stage, hang in there and continue to pray. If prayer is boring, if it's dry, if it's hard, you've got to continue to pray. One day, what the Church teaches, and the saints do as well, is that prayer enters into the third stage. And John of the Cross himself says very, very few people ever come to this stage. The great saints come to this stage. This is called the unitive stage. And this stage is basically a stage where a soul, a person, has passed through the others. They've even passed through the purgative stage, and they have put God very first all the time in their life, and He is their beloved above all things. Then that soul is like constantly unified with the mind and heart of Christ. And so kind of like the things that they're doing, the things that they're saying are really Christ the Lord in them, doing those things, saying those things, thinking those things. It's really, really amazing. Here's what St. John of the Cross, one of his explanations of the unitive stage. He says, "The soul now feels that it is all inflamed in the divine union. Its palate is all bathed in glory and in love, that in the intimate part of its substance it is flooded with no less than rivers of glory, abounding in delights, and from its depths flow rivers of living water, which the Son of God declared will rise up in such souls." So that's an amazing description. I hope to make it there one day. St. John tells us that the unitive stage is a stage that can happen to us even in our earthly life. But he says that it's absolutely a stage that we have to get to. And if we don't get to it in this life, then we absolutely will get to it after we pass through the purgative stage in the next life. So that's kind of a helpful clue for us about the Catholic understanding also of purgatory. Now, I hope that's helped. We've talked a little bit about the 3 stages of prayer. We used the analogy of running, and I hope that helps you. Anybody who plays sports, it should. The idea of prayer in the spiritual life is, if prayer is hard for you, pray. If it's wonderful for you, pray. If it's boring, pray. Because of our wounded nature and the effects of sin, we're kind of like, our desires are oriented not to pray. And that's why when we do pray, we're going against something until you pass through stages of purification that allow you to be detached from all of those difficulties. Just like a runner who is running cross country, you can't get to that point until you've stuck with it in perseverance and God's special graces. Okay, keep praying, and that's all for the Spiritual Minute episode 2, or whatever episode this is. God bless you all.